Hey, welcome to our Manney Resources training for today for Saturday. And we are just getting things up and running. So if you're just joining us now, hey, welcome to the training. And we've got a great training for you today. And let's make sure we're going live here. We've got a couple of links that we're going to go ahead and drop in the comment section for you. Today, we've been really building up to the kickoff of our brand new devotional we're really excited about called You Are Not Alone. It is Promises from Psalms, a 30-day devotional, and we're going to talk today specifically about how to use this devotional in your morning time routine, and as well, we're going to talk about how to be able to use it for encouraging your friends. There's multiple different scenarios in which you can use this devotional to be able to help people, and so we're going to talk about how to really leverage the power of this devotional and jump in. So we've got talking about the devotional. We're going to talk about Amanda's going to actually do some training for how to use it in what we call our morning time routine 30 to Thrive training. And so if you're joining with us and watching on here, go ahead and share this with your watch party, with your friends, family members, anybody that you kind of track with. And as well, if you're watching the replay, please feel free to go ahead and comment. We love getting feedback from you. Any questions, comments, insight, feedback, please let us know to go ahead and just get some interaction there with us. We love hearing from you. So feel free, even during the training, to go ahead, and Amanda's watching the link there, the comment section. So we will have this available. We'll talk more about this. This is coming out Friday. This coming Friday on the 20th. And so you can go ahead and mark that down on your calendar, kind of tuck that away, keep that in mind. As we're kicking off this training today, one of the things I want to talk about, and I'll get Amanda here in just a minute, is question for you would be, where would you go in the Bible if you were extremely discouraged? What psalm would you go to? What passage of scripture would you look for? Some of the things that come quickly to mind if you've been around church for any length of time, Psalm 23. But where do you go if you're hurting for your kids? Psalm 23 can be helpful, but Psalm 23, outside of that, there's another 149 different psalms. So does God have anything to say or any promises for us when we hurt for our kids? What about when we feel like we're forgotten, when we go unappreciated? What about when we have a friend who maybe is going through the last stage of their life? And so where would you turn to if you're trying to counsel somebody, help somebody going through where they feel in a really strange situation, where they've been falsely accused in a business situation or in their marriage? Where would you turn to? What hope would you give somebody? If somebody was fatigued, exhausted, if they felt lonely, if they felt like their family had some family turmoil, where would you turn to? And for many of us, we kind of stumble through life and struggle along. We know that the Bible is the answer for us, and yet there's this strange effect that takes place that we know God has the answers for us, and we want to go there, but we feel guilty because sometimes we turn to, well, we just escape. And so if I can just escape from my problems, maybe that'll be better if I don't have to think about them. Other times we go ahead and we just work. We work through, push through, and just kind of avoid it. But God's Word has incredible insight and instruction for us to be able to help us. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to help you grow your faith so you can change your life. And specifically, we want to take the guilt away from you by putting tools in your hands and help you push through the guesswork so you know exactly where to go, so you have confidence and have answers for dealing with problems in life. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump over. If you're interested, you can go ahead and there is a guide that you can download. And so we're going to go ahead, and I think we put that guide in the comments section. So feel free, pause the video, go ahead and download that, and you're going to can follow right along as well. What you're going to see in the guide is what we have for our slide deck. How to use the devotional. We're going to kick off, first of all, we're going to talk about how the resources can help you. This devotional is split up into 7 different sections, and as you see there, here are some different kind of topics. This is really can be turned into like a kind of an index resource for you. So if you're going through a season of life that you see the first section there, you're not alone when life seems to be against you. And so there are 8 different devotionals, 8 different promises for the problems that we face when we feel like life's against us. You're not alone in the season of uncertainty. If you feel like you don't know what your next step should be, if you're not sure what to do, if you feel like you can't really hear from God, know His plan for your life, there are some promises to help you work through those scenarios. A third section is you're not alone in your family struggles. Boy, being cooped up in quarantine for the last 2 years, have you found yourself, there's people that you can't live without, but you can't stand to live with? Boy, we're all there at different times. And so what do you do when you've lost someone you love? What do you do when you feel like your family has abandoned you? When your heart aches because of stress and struggles in your family relationships and dynamics? Another section is called You're Not Alone when you're in a stressful season. Boy, when the pressure's on, what do you do? Where do you look to find God's help? Are there promises in Psalms for that? The answer is yes, and we're going to talk to you today about how to find those. What about the 6th section is You're Not Alone when your relationships struggle. When you've messed up and you've hurt somebody, how do you go about reconciling that relationship? What do you do when you need forgiveness or you need to offer forgiveness? How does that work? What about second chances? Can you ask for a second chance from somebody? And then last of all, you're not alone at the end of your days. And so when it comes to being at the end of your days, I'm going to go ahead and if you can pull those out for me so I can just use this as a reference. At the end of your days, whether you're going through getting bad news from the doctor, or you've got a friend who's gotten bad news from the doctor, or maybe you've got a loved one who's maybe in, kind of in hospice care, something like that. We have several devotionals that kind of at the end correlate to how to help somebody. If you look in the second column there, you can use the devotional to look for promises to problems, and here are just 8 different devotional examples. So there's a devotional called You're Not Alone when you're lost. And so the promise we can find there is Psalm 139. When you feel like you've been forgotten, where do you go to? Psalm 77 has great insight and help when you feel like you've gone unsupported, unappreciated, when people just are ungrateful for you. That's a great place to find encouragement. What about when you want to give up? When you're just ready to throw the towel in? Psalm 28 and Psalm 119 are places to go to find hope and help when you want to give up. What about when you've lost your hope? Psalm 42. When you feel lonely, Psalm 91 is a really great encouragement. Actually, the one psalm that was written by Moses, I believe, was actually Psalm 90, but Psalm 91 is known as the soldier's psalm. And so when you feel lonely and you need God's protection, Psalm 91. When you feel that you need encouragement, when you go through discouraging seasons, Psalm 138, specifically a psalm that actually ties into a pretty incredible story of David, where his men, his mighty band of warriors, wanted to turn on him. So if you've ever found people in your life wanting to turn on you and you're discouraged, needing to know what to do, we talk about that in that devotional for that day. When you can't hear God's voice, the classic Verizon commercial, and now I think it's the Sprint guy, can you hear me now? Psalm 22 is a great place to turn to, which is also known as a messianic psalm. A large part of that psalm is kind of giving you insight to what Jesus might have thought and said on the cross. Psalm 22 starts out, my God, why have you forsaken me? One of the 7 phrases Jesus cries from the cross. And if you ever wanted to read, Jesus' mind and think about what was he thinking about on the cross, that's a great example. And then when you're exhausted, Psalm 127 is a great place of encouragement. So those are just 8. There's 22 more examples of that in the devotional to bring help and encouragement. Now, what about some different scenarios? More than just for using for your morning devotions. Here are some situations you can leverage the devotional help others for discipleship. Grab a friend and say, hey, there's this brand new resource and I picked up a copy of it for me and for you. Hey, do you want to go ahead and do this together? And we'll actually show you how to be able to use this in a discipleship scenario. For a book club, boy, it'd be a great way. You can go ahead and meet 6 weeks and go ahead and you can read through the devotions Monday through Friday and then discuss it at the next book club. There's questions as well to follow through and just kind of ask one another what they learned. Small group study, again, same scenario. You can take those big topics that we had talked about. You're not alone when life seems to be against you and seasons of uncertainty. You can use those as your weekly theme and then go ahead and study for your small group. If you're making a hospital visit to see somebody, get several copies of this, and then go ahead and if you work in hospice or you work in bereavement care, something like that, you can use this as an encouragement for the family members going through difficulty. For grief counseling, it's a great resource as you have a session for counseling somebody. If you've been called on by a pastor or somebody in your ministry and you have a counseling arm or a counseling ministry in your church, you can use this as kind of something to put into somebody's hand for them to do work during the week. It's not laborious. It's something they can do every day, just a few minutes a day. Funeral follow-up. I just did a funeral a few weeks ago. Something great to be able to leave with some folks. A gift for a friend or a neighbor. Even for your personal devotions. Amanda's going to cover that here in just a minute. Hey, what about the next time you have some house guests over, maybe for dinner, or maybe they're staying over the night with you? You can use this as a great encouragement to send them on their way. Graduation's right around the corner, as well as Father's Day's coming up. For someone who seems far from God, we've specifically written these for people who have doubts and questions, cares, concerns. For someone who's not a follower of Jesus, this is really going to be able to hit home and encourage them. For counseling, we've talked about that a little bit. For your teen, some of the topics we talk about in these devotionals answer some of those big life questions of why, God, why is this happening to me? When people falsely accuse me, there's a devotional that talks about that. And if your teens have big questions like that, great resource. A couples devotional. You can read it together in the morning. We have couples in our church who've actually done this with other devotionals. And then maybe even for family devotion time. Sometimes we'll actually read the devotionals for our kids to use together. All right, we're going to go ahead and transition. Amanda's going to go ahead and she's going to cover how to use this for your morning time routine. And then we're actually going to go through and actually do day one together. And so I'm going to go ahead and let her take the mic. And then I've got a slide for this as well. So whenever you need that slide pulled up, just let me know.
Okay. All right, we've talked about this several times, but just to hit it once again, or if you haven't watched any of our other videos, if what I'm talking about, we're going to talk about 30 to Thrive. If that is something that interests you, I will try to drop a link for the video, but we did a training several weeks ago. And if you find that training 30 to Thrive, you can find that on our Manney Resources Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. That will definitely give you more detail. But I'm just going to hit it really quick. When we talk about 30 to Thrive, we're talking about 30 minutes a day. And this is your morning time routine. We believe at Manney Resources, if you can change your morning, you can grow your faith, and you can change your life. So we teach you how to do that in just 30 minutes a day. And that 30 minutes a day is broken up into 3 segments. The first segment is reading for 10 minutes. Now, you can either read a devotional or you can read your Bible. Obviously, we're promoting the You Are Not Alone devotional. So for today, if you were doing 30 to Thrive, you would read 10 minutes in the devotional. And then we're going to actually go through this in just a few minutes, and you're going to get a look inside. But just for now, just know you're going to do 10 minutes of that. Your second 10 minutes is going to be journaling. I'm going to show you the journal I am currently using. This is the Morning by Morning journal, and that is my favorite of the bunch that we've just created. I'll drop a link for that in the notes in just a couple minutes. Inside the journal, there is a section for prayer, and that includes gratitude, confession, and your requests for the day. So you go through that, and then you pray through your list. And then at the bottom, you're going to write down your Bible reading for the day. Either it's going to be your Bible reading or what devotional you read. And then you're going to write down what thought stood out to you, or maybe a verse that stood out to you. Whatever God lays on your heart, you're going to just write that in the blank. So if you're doing the devotional has questions. You're going to do those questions. So when you get to the journaling part, you're just going to write down something that stood out for you, or maybe the main principle that you took away from the devotional. So you're going to do 10 minutes of that. That's the second part of the 30 to Thrive. And then the third part, the last 10 minutes, is simply reading a book. You can choose any book you want it to be. It can be inspirational. It can be a Christian book. It can be a book that has to do with your work, with a hobby, whatever you want it to be. I am currently reading Find Your People by Jenny Allen. I'm almost done with that. When I'm done with that, then I'll pick my next book, which actually I got a book for Mother's Day that I'm excited to jump into. But this is the book I'm currently reading. Matt, I believe, is currently reading Think Again by Adam Grant.
Sorry, it's kind of reflective. I got this at the library.
Yes. So that's the book that he currently reads for his last 10 minutes. So in 30 to Thrive, 30 minutes, you're reading You're writing, you're reading. You're reading a devotional or your Bible. You're journaling, which includes your prayer and what you learned in your reading. And then you're reading a book, whatever you choose for that to be. That is 30 to Thrive. I'll put some links in.
Yeah. So as Amanda's dropping links in there for you, you have just a few minutes a day. So out of 24 hours, you have 30 minutes that you're going to spend on really encouraging and growing your faith. One of the things that we tell people is this is a way so that you can find your way. So we've given this pretty a structure. You say this seems too simple, and we've kept it that way because if in the morning, if you have a very complex morning time routine, boy, when your brain maybe is not in gear and maybe the coffee's kind of, I had a lady one time say to me, I really encourage drinking coffee in the morning to wake you up. And she said, I don't think you have to have coffee to wake you up in the morning. You need to be more spiritual than that and love God enough that you don't need to have caffeine coursing through your system. And I said, well, you're more spiritual than I am. So way to go. High five. But whatever it is, we just keep it very, very, this morning I did this for my routine. And actually, honestly, I did my Bible reading, I did my journaling, and didn't have a chance to get to my reading for today, my extracurricular, my third 10 minutes, just because of time. But that's okay. But the idea is you do what you can. Even if you can't get the whole thing in, you do what you can for that day. And so we're going to go ahead and jump in and actually take you through to give you some real life feel for what the devotional would be like. So here's an example, day 1 from the journal. And so I'm going to go ahead and read this to us, and so you can kind of follow along there on your screen, and then just kind of listen in. So this is day 1. This is you are not alone when you're lost. And so again, the format for the devotional is we share a story, we give you a scripture for encouragement, and then some questions to do follow-up. So I'm going to go ahead and read the story, and then Amanda's going to go ahead and talk through the scripture, and then the questions for follow-up. Day 1, when you're lost. I stepped off the train onto an empty platform. A lone older gentleman sat on a bench reading the morning paper. I instantly knew I was not where I was supposed to be. The hair stood on the back of my neck as my heart sank. The train pulled away with any chance of finding my way back home. A 16-year-old in a foreign country with a few $100s in traveler's checks in a suitcase? I was lost. My only thought, how am I going to get back home? Run Home Jack. One of my favorite movies from my childhood was Hook. Robin Williams plays Peter Panning, an aged Peter Pan who has lost his way and forgotten where he's come from and estranged from his family. In one scene in Neverland, Hook sets up a baseball scrimmage among his pirate baddies to win the heart of Panning's son Jack. With Jack up to bat, a group of the pirates cheer from the stands holding letter signs spelling out, "Run Home Jack!" Pirate promptly yells at the marauders, "No, no, no, you've got it all backwards. It's home run, Jack." It's in that moment when Jack sees this cue and has a change of heart. We've heard home is where the heart is. We've all have a longing for that place we feel most welcomed and loved. Nothing unnerves us more than when we've lost our way. We might be physically lost. We may have compromised our integrity. The uncertainty of life may cause us to feel unstable and insecure. You will be found. One psalmist writes, "But as for me, I almost lost my footing. My feet were slipping and I was almost gone." Psalm 73:2. He looks at the prosperity of those who are doing wrong and the idiocy of trying to do right in his life. He's lost. David writes, "My heart is sick, withered like grass, and I have lost my appetite." Psalm 102:4. Have you ever been so troubled and lost that you couldn't eat? It's in those moments we must keep going. One of the amazing aspects of the Psalms is that the writers pour out their hearts, complain, and grieve, and God never corrects them for doing so. By the end of each psalm, with the exception of Psalm 88, like we talked about last week, every single song resolves with praise in God for his goodness. David pens, "Make me walk along the path of your commands, for that is where my happiness is found." Psalm 119:35. Just like a coach brings the team back to the fundamentals, or a military general calls the troops to regroup and get back to the mission, David says, "It's in following God's direction that I find my way back to God." He goes so far to write on one of the most comforting psalms in Psalm 139. Listen to these words. Psalm 139, verses 7 to 12. I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go up to heaven, you are there. If I go down to the grave, you are there. If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell by the farthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me and your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night, but even in darkness I cannot hide from you. To you the night shines as bright as day. Darkness and light are the same to you. Psalm 139, verses 7 to 12. No matter where you are, no matter where you go, no matter how far, you are never too lost to be found by God. The rest of my story, I did find my way home. Otherwise, this could be written in German. Amanda's going to go ahead and she's going to jump in here and talk through the questions for the devotional.
So at the end of each devotional, then there's a reading, which obviously for this devotional, the readings are all going to be in Psalms, and then there's questions to answer. So today's Bible reading is from Psalm 139, 1 through 12. Matt just read several of those verses. And then here's some of the questions for today. The first question, what are some of the places that God's presence still finds us? So in that psalm that he read, it talks about where can God find me? And if it gives all these examples, well, what if this happens and what if this happens? So you would just take a moment. What are some of the places that God's presence can still find us? And then the second question, where is the place or maybe the circumstance that you feel furthest from God's presence? And this is just taking a moment in your life right now. What is going on? Maybe there's a circumstance, maybe it's present, or maybe it's something in your past when you felt so far away from God. You felt like God was so quiet, and you felt like he wasn't speaking. A couple years ago, Matt and I were going through some stuff at the church, and four families moved away during a matter of about 3 months, and because that we're a small church, our finances just tanked, and things just got really out of control really fast. We ended up selling our house and moving, but for those couple months when we weren't getting any income, and it just
friend paid our mortgage.
Yeah, a friend paid our mortgage 1 month. It felt like God was so quiet. And we kept asking, like, God, what are we doing? Do you not want us doing the church? Are we supposed to be somewhere else? Are we supposed to move on? And we just had so many questions and so few answers. And during that time, we really felt like God was just absolutely quiet. And God taught us so much during that time and brought us around. But for me, working on this devotional, that would be what I would write down, that period of time for us. And then the bottom of that page says, if you've found yourself in a place where you feel far away from God, spend a few minutes talking to God. Just spending a few minutes in prayer can reopen those connection points and make us feel God's presence again. When you're in a time where you do feel so far away from God, you may feel like God's not listening and you may feel like God's not answering. But on our end, the best thing you can do is still open yourself and pray to God, because even if you don't feel like you get an answer, you're still making that connection point. And I firmly believe for Matt and I that our morning time routine, the whole 30 to Thrive, that is what got us through that time. And that's why we're still in ministry today. That's why we still are faithfully serving God today. But I honestly believe if we didn't, we wouldn't be. So during those times when we felt so like God was so far away, we still spent time crying out to God and talking to him. And that's what kind of kept us, what I would say, tethered to God's presence. So if you're, when you were doing this devotional, you would just spend a few minutes telling God where you're at, telling him where your heart is. Ask those questions, ask those hard questions, but use that as a time to connect to God.
Yeah. One of the things that I do want to really encourage you with, and I'm going to have Amanda talk to this point here in just a minute, as far as logistically how to facilitate this, because you do have the devotional that you'll be working through, but then as well you'll have your journal, and I'm going to have her talk about, can you write the answers in your devotional, or do you write them in your journal? Like, how does that look? Do you write down scriptures in your journal, devotional? And if you can talk about that in a minute. One of the things I love, so we work on these devotionals together. So I write the first section, so the story, there to kind of to capture your interest. And so every day there's going to be a story that just, it makes you feel good. One of my callings in life, one of the things I value very much is to bring joy and encouragement. And to me, a boring book or a boring sermon is a bad sermon or a bad book. And so there's always going to be a story to really capture your attention. And then,
I think it's still on there.
Is it stuck?
It might be.
If you're sorry about that. If it's still stuck, let me just.
Unless Unless mine is stuck.
Oh, maybe Amanda's is stuck. Let me just double check here. Yeah, we're good. We're good. Okay. So the idea is then to move from that story to some scriptural principles, and then Amanda jumps in and she gives some reflection. One of the things that I think is so powerful, and you cannot, and like this is the secret sauce of what makes a morning time routine extremely important. There's the reading a devotional, there's writing in a journal, and then there's reading something, and they're all very crucial, and they all interlock and work together. You can do one, they're standalone as well. You can do one and get something from it, or you can do all three and really get a bigger bang for your buck. But these questions, I think, are extremely important for you to answer in your morning time, because here's the deal. It's one thing to work in your life in the day-to-day to make your life functional, but I'm going to talk about this in preparation. This is just coming to mind. I'm going to preach here for just a minute. If your life is functional and your family is functional, that means you're getting to school on time and you're getting to work on time and you're getting paid. That's functional. You're paying your bills. You're just going through the motions. You're engaging with other people. That's functionality. But if all your focus is on having a functional life, but you don't have a spiritual or relational or emotional health, your life will be a dysfunctional life. Your family will be highly dysfunctional. And so when people say like, man, we're doing everything, like, what's the deal? Well, when we focus on functionality at the cost of spirituality, we create a dysfunctional scenario. And it won't happen right away, but over time, I mean, you think about if you don't eat a day, are you going to feel it? Yeah, you're going to feel uncomfortable. But you go multiple days on end, eventually your body's going to start to break down and shut down. The same thing with feeding our soul. So there's a hole in your soul that needs to be filled. And using these questions that Amanda put together are so good because they're so insightful. It's not just working, it's working on your life, just not working through the motions. And so I really encourage you. She has questions that bring in what we're talking about, but then they really are reflective. Like, what am I going through right now? And it's bringing the subconscious to the forefront of your prefrontal cortex, where you process consequences and decisions. Why do most teenagers not make wise decisions? Because they don't think there are consequences, because the prefrontal lobe is not fully developed. Well, for you and I as adults and adulting, those questions that Amanda put together really bring back from the subconscious to the forefront. Hey, well, like, where am I at right now? How's my marriage going? How is my relationship with my kids going? And so answering those questions just a few minutes can get you thinking about, and guess what? This is what the Bible calls meditation. We're not sitting still and there's no maybe incense burning and going, that kind of stuff, or being mindful, but this is really what meditation means. And so when David talks about, I meditate on your words day and night, they are food for my soul. This is what we're talking about when it comes to really growing your faith. And that's why these questions are so important. So really think about it and spend time on it. Don't just fly over it, okay, I'm just checking off. Here's my first 10 minutes, check off my second 10 minutes. But this is really to help you grow your faith. And this is where the rubber meets the road. Can you go ahead and answer then? Mm-hmm. Do I write my answers in the devotional? Do I write them in a journal?
Okay. The cool thing about it is it's choose your own adventure. There is no right or wrong answer. Matt and I, when we started creating resources, we actually created the journals long before we created the devotionals. And once the devotionals came along, we kind of hit this impasse and we're like, okay, do we... what do we need to do? Do we need to combine the journals and the devotionals? Do we keep them two separate products? And we went back and forth for a long time. We decided to keep them as is for this reason. Some people buy the devotional and they love the devotionals, but they've never bought a journal. Some people buy a journal and love the journals and have never bought a devotional. So we keep those two separate products. Now here's how they work together. If you are a person that likes a lot of writing, do more journaling. If you're a person that just kind of wants to keep moving, then do the devotional. So if you're going to use the devotional and you're going to open it up and do the questions, go ahead and write the answers in the devotional. That's totally fine. Go ahead and do that. And then when you get to the journal, if you want to skip the journaling part, that's fine, or just write down the main thought for the day. If you like lots of writing, go ahead and you can do in both. What I would recommend, my thought would be, is to go through the devotional, answer the questions in the devotional, and then when you get to the journaling part of your journal, just write down what devotional you did for the day and maybe a thought that stood out to you. You can definitely, we have some people that do the devotional and write all the answers to the questions in their journal, and that's fine too. For me, the journal part for me is a little bit in that the devotional, you're answering questions, but the journal is where you're kind of writing down your thoughts. So if I was doing the devotional we did today, I would write in the answers for the first couple blanks in the devotional, and then that last part when it said, it says, what did you go through when you felt far away from God? And then it said, pray to God today. I would go to my journal then, and I would probably write out a prayer to God. God, this is where I'm at today. I feel so far from you. And use that journaling time in your journal as a time to really write down the answers. But any way you go about doing it, there is no right or wrong way. You can use the products however they work for you. The whole point is that we are providing kind of like this smorgasbord, this buffet of materials and resources, and you can pick and choose what's going to work for you and how you want to make it work.
We've got two more parts of this that we want to cover. I'm going to have Amanda. She's going to talk about in just a minute some of those scenarios in which you want to leverage. So outside of your devotional time, outside of your morning time routine, you can get super creative. So two scenarios I'm going to ask her to address here in just a moment. One would be, Amanda, if you can talk about if you were going to disciple somebody and use this as a discipleship kind of book, like how would you take somebody through this? So think about that, or even like in a small group kind of setting, if you can think through possibly if that kind of makes sense. One of the parts in the introduction, so the introduction really lays the groundwork for you, and I want to go ahead and just read a couple of just sections from the introduction that I think will really give you a taste of what this is all about. Psalms to soothe your soul. Sparks leapt from the flint and stone. A faint swirl of smoke rose from the small gathering of twigs, leaves, and moss. The chill of the night was accented by the pungent smell of earth and livestock. The sound of sheep settling in for the night was the final cue to set about making a fire. A small cave provided just the right amount of shelter from the night. The young teenager, a shepherd by trade, broke branches and stood them against each other in a teepee style above the rising flames of the fledgling fire. He pulled a wineskin from his leather bag, a small round loaf of bread, and a few slices of dried fruit. After a long day searching the highlands for a clearing well suited for the sheep, the shepherd breathed a long sigh of relief. He wrapped his shoulders in a wool cloak and leaned against the cave wall as he settled into his nightly routine. The fire crackled, the bleat of young lambs and the chorus of crickets set the background song. The stars sparkled with a particular brilliance this night. The shepherd set the wineskin back into his leather bag. He reached deep into the bag and pulled out a long rolled leather scroll. He untied 2 leather strands and unrolled the scroll. Light from the fire illuminated a cream color of papyrus. A small wooden dowel with a point on the end tumbled from the parchment to the ground. The dowel sufficed for a writing utensil. He pulled another small pouch and a small clay bowl from his bag. Black inky powder spilled from the little pouch into the vessel. He added a few drops of wine to the mixture to create ink. With his parchment in hand and stylus in the other, young David penned, "When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars." He wrote a few more lines and set his writing aside. He hummed a few notes. Being alone in the wild with nothing but sheep and his leather bag, David kept his favorite comforts close at hand. His most prized possession for this highland adventure was his harp. He pulled the wooden carved instrument from his bag. He plucked a few strings, tightening them to adjust the tone. With fingers in position, he strummed the harp and sang the tune from a moment before. This time he added the words, "When I consider." Songs in the night do something for the soul of a weary, wandering traveler. This is how David encouraged himself in the Lord. So that's how the introduction starts out, but then I want to just read one more selection from this to go ahead and really kind of set the tone for this devotional. This part's called Symphony of the Psalms. In Reflections on the Psalms, author C.S. Lewis writes, "The most valuable thing the Psalms do for me is to express the same delight in God which made David dance." David taps into the mighty power of the pen. He does 3,000 years ago what songs do for us today. They help us to express and put into words the depth of our thoughts and emotions. The Psalms cover a multitude of issues and challenges we face in life. David speaks of interpersonal conflict, the wonders of nature, the heartbreak of losing a child, the guilt of sin, and the forgiveness of God. The topics range from our relationship to God, others, and to ourselves. The Psalms bring beauty, order, and balance to the chaos of life. God draws close, life comes into clarity, and heaven is sweeter. death has lost its sting. For the one who feels so lonely, abandoned even, God is ever and always near. For the one whose heart breaks and feels hopeless, we find our hope in God's presence and promises. Life makes little sense, and heaven is a cruel promise for those who fall short in understanding the plans and purposes of God. What we experience this side of heaven sounds like a cacophony of noise and nonsense. But for the one who gets a glimpse of heaven, even the pain of this life only lingers for a moment to remind us of the glories to come. Lewis goes on to write, "The tuning up of an orchestra can be itself delightful, but only to those who can in some measure, however little, anticipate the symphony. For someone who's never heard or gone to a symphony, the tuning can be a turnoff. A short-sighted patron may stand and walk away in disgust and frustration before the performance ever starts. But for the well-traveled lover of song, the tuning of the symphony is the cue of the conductor for the brilliance and beauty to come. So too in life, the Psalms are our guide to tune our ears to the splendor of God's promise in suffering, the rapture of God's presence for the lonely, and the pleasure of God's peace for those pressed by stress. You may feel a sense of loneliness, but rest assured, the Psalms remind us that you and I were never alone." And so that kind of gives us the heartbeat behind this. And so hopefully you get a real sweet taste of what is in store in the devotional. So Amanda, go ahead and share with us how we can leverage this in maybe a couple of ways, the best you can, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up for our training today.
All right. There's so many ways to use this, but what we've found is obviously in personal use in your morning time. And then what we've done is we've had several people that are newer to the church, and they've picked up the devotional and start working through it. And what's interesting is as they come to different things, they'll start having questions and things that maybe that stood out to them. I think of I don't remember if it was the devotional or the study guide we did, but one of them was when we talk about the verses about when Jesus tells us you need to hate your family and follow Jesus. And they're real new, and they were like, okay, well, we're reading this and what it says, but okay, are we supposed to hate Jesus? And it gave us a really great time to be able to open up and kind of talk through some of these principles. And because these verses are straight from the Bible, and we're having you read the verses, and then we're having the story kind of sets the stage. And then there's questions. It's great for either we have non-believers that do our books, and we have people who have just become believers. So it's a great way to kind of use it as like a form of discipleship to help them grow in their faith. And then for group study, it's great in that you can have there's kind of a couple different ways to work it, but if you want to work in it through a group, you can have them do, okay, we're going to do the first, we're going to do the week at home, and then on Monday when we have our group, we're going to go over the answers, or you can do one together. It's kind of however you want to do it. But what's nice about it is when you have several different people working through the devotional, they're reading the same thing you're reading. They're writing down sometimes the same answers, but then they're taking what applies to them, and they're going to come up with something different. So then when you meet together, you can discuss, hey, this day 3 was really good. Oh, I love day 4. And it kind of gives you something to talk about, but something where you're connecting, even though you're not connecting every day, you're doing the same devotional.
Yeah. What I love about what you were saying there is there's really two things that are great. It's Acts chapter 2 says that they prayed together, they fellowshiped together, they studied from house to house together. So in our Western culture, a lot of what we do is very individualistic. But when it comes to studying the Bible, actually a very Eastern way of approaching knowledge and information was to do it in a group. They would discuss things in a group. And so for some people that lack the structure or the discipline to actually do this, one of the great ways is accountability. There's accountability knowing, hey, we're going to go ahead and like Monday through Friday, like Amanda said, we're going to do days 1 through 5. And then when we meet next, we're going to go ahead and discuss, what are some insights. So there's accountability for it. But then number 2, there's the group aspect. So as people are sharing their insights, you can go ahead and say like, yeah, that's true. Or even, hey, that, here's some clarification there, like Amanda had mentioned. So it's really good for accountability and for like the group study aspect of it. So as I mentioned before, there's other great resources. And for folks, we really made this a very much engaging kind of stories for the devotional. So that's really kind of the heartbeat behind what's coming. I'm going to go ahead and just talk a little bit about as we wrap up here, our whole goal with Manney Resources is that we believe that you can grow your faith and you can change your life just one morning at a time, as Amanda had mentioned with that morning time routine. And then coming up this next Saturday, we're going to actually continue on kind of with this Psalm study. We're going to take some Psalms verses and teach you how to create verse images and turn them into wall decor. And so we're kind of breaking away just a little bit and doing a change up here. What we're going to show you is so awesome because you can literally take what you're learning in your morning time routine and put it up on your walls. And so we're going to actually show you in a very economical way. There's some things that we've learned, some resources right here in our neighborhood, how to print off great, beautiful pictures, how to put them. We're going to show you, put them in a picture frame and show you and talk to you where you can go to make that happen. And then May 20th, You Are Not Alone is live. It's out in the wild, and you can have at it. And so we are so excited to be able to launch this. One of the things we will mention, so if you want to track with us so you don't miss the release of this, you can go ahead and join our email list today. Amanda's going to drop a link in the comments section. And so she's already put that in there. And so you can go ahead and grab that and be ready to go ahead and be on the email list. And we'll keep you up to date. And also track with us on Manney Resources. We'll keep promoting the devotional throughout this week, so you can go ahead and be ready to order it coming Friday. So all that to say, hopefully you're encouraged today. We've got such a full heart after today's training. We're so encouraged. Hopefully you're encouraged and have a desire to go ahead, not just keep this for yourself, but as we have studied God's word and we've grown together, like literally our morning time routine, we actually sit across from each other and we'll read, and then we'll kind of bounce ideas off of each other and things like that. And so that's a great way that you can do this. Doing it with a friend, doing it with your spouse, doing it with your kids. It's just a great way to grow spiritually together. And so that's it for today's training. Any other thoughts you want to throw in there? Nope. Thanks so much for tracking with us here at Manney Resource. For Amanda and myself, our goal is to help you grow your faith so that you can change your life. Thank you so much for watching today.